I'm Brielle Morgan, 28, and I just discovered my entire childhood was built on lies. Yesterday, while helping my parents move, I found financial records showing they had secretly funded my sister's college education while telling me they couldn't afford mine. The favoritism I'd always suspected but could never prove was right there in black and white: 20 years of receipts, statements, and a separate account labeled Cassidy's future. My sister got everything. I got excuses. Now I have to decide: confront the family that betrayed me or walk away forever. Before I continue with my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt that sting of family favoritism or suspected something wasn't right in your home, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life drama stories. Trust me, what happened when my parents returned from that vacation with my sister will make you question everything you know about family loyalty. The discovery of those financial records was just the tip of the iceberg, but to understand the magnitude of the betrayal, you need to see the pattern that had been forming throughout my entire childhood. Growing up in our modest suburban home in Connecticut, I always felt the subtle differences in how my parents treated Cassidy and me, but I convinced myself it was just sibling paranoia. Cassidy was 3 years older, blonde, and graceful like our mother, while I took after our father's side with dark hair and what my mother called a sturdier build. From an early age, Cassidy showed natural talent in dance and academics, collecting trophies and certificates that adorned our living room walls. My parents never missed her recitals or award ceremonies, rearranging work schedules and canceling appointments to be there, front row, cameras ready. My soccer games and debate tournaments, however, often had empty seats where parents should be. "Your father has an important meeting," or "I'm not feeling well today, honey," became familiar excuses. I learned to tell them about my events at the last minute to avoid the disappointment of their carefully crafted reasons for absence. Christmas mornings revealed the disparity in stark contrast. Cassidy would unwrap designer clothes, the latest electronics, and jewelry, while I received practical gifts, school supplies, plain clothes, or books. When I asked once why Santa brought Cassidy more expensive presents, my mother quickly responded, "Santa knows what each girl needs," while exchanging a knowing glance with my father. The summer I turned 13 was when I first truly understood something was fundamentally unequal. My parents announced a family trip to Disney World, my childhood dream destination. For weeks, I researched attractions and planned our itinerary, creating a color-coded schedule of must-see shows and character meetings. 3 days before departure, my mother sat at the edge of my bed with an expression I'd come to recognize as her disappointment delivery face. "Brielle, there's been a change of plans," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your father's bonus wasn't as large as we expected. We can only afford to take one of you girls to Disney this year." The next morning, I watched from the window as my father loaded suitcases into our SUV, including the new pink luggage set they'd bought for Cassidy. My sister didn't even want to go to Disney. She'd complained for weeks about missing her friends' pool parties. Yet there she was, sliding into the back seat with her Disney Princess autograph book, a peace offering my parents purchased when I locked myself in my room crying. "We'll take you next year, Brielle," my father promised as they pulled out of the driveway. This is just how things worked out this time. Next year never came. Instead, I got a Disney snow globe and a Mickey Mouse t-shirt that was 2 sizes too small. Cassidy returned with stories of VIP tours, character dinners, and hotel room upgrades. Apparently, my father's smaller-than-expected bonus stretched remarkably far for 3 people. The pattern continued throughout high school. When Cassidy needed a car for her senior year, my parents bought her a new Volkswagen Beetle. When my senior year arrived, I was told they couldn't afford another car, and I could use the family's old Honda when they didn't need it. Cassidy's prom dress budget was whatever she fell in love with, while I was given a strict $100 limit and suggestions to check clearance racks. College revealed the most significant disparity. My parents had saved enough for Cassidy to attend her dream school, a private university with a prestigious dance program. When it came time for my college applications, they sat me down for a realistic conversation about finances. "We just don't have college savings for both of you," my mother explained, showing me brochures for community colleges and financial aid applications. "Your sister's program was specialized and we had to prioritize. You're so practical and resourceful, Brielle. We know you'll find a way." I did find a way. Working 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load, taking on student loans that I'm still paying off, and graduating without my family present because they were attending Cassidy's graduate school orientation that same weekend. Throughout my 20s, I tried to disconnect from the obvious favoritism. I moved 2 states away, built a career in marketing, and limited family visits to major holidays. I convinced myself that distance would heal the wound of being the less favored child. I even developed a carefully crafted persona during family gatherings, cheerful, unaffected, and never revealing how much the continued preferential treatment still stung. Last Christmas was when my suspicions crystallized into something I couldn't ignore. My parents announced they were helping Cassidy with the down payment on her first home, a substantial gift that made my sister burst into tears of gratitude. I sat silently thinking about the email I'd received that morning from my student loan servicer, reminding me I still had 7 years of payments left. When I mentioned later privately that I was struggling to save for my own place while managing my loan payments, my mother patted my hand and said, "You've always been so independent, Brielle. That's what we love about you. You don't need our help like Cassidy does." Independence wasn't a choice. It was the only option I'd been given. The narrative they'd created about me being the strong one or the self-sufficient daughter was convenient justification for their unequal distribution of resources, time, and affection. That conversation was what prompted me to offer help when my parents decided to downsize last month. I told myself I was being a good daughter, but deep down I was looking for evidence, something concrete to validate the feeling that had haunted me since childhood. And in that dusty attic, sorting through decades of family history stored in plastic bins and cardboard boxes, I finally found it. The manila envelope was labeled Family Financial Records in my father's neat handwriting. Inside were bank statements, investment accounts, and education funds, 2 separate tracks of financial planning that told the story my parents never would. While they claimed financial hardship when it came to my education and needs, they had been systematically investing in Cassidy's future since before I was born. As I stood in that attic, documents spread around me like the pieces of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. A text message illuminated my phone screen. It was from my mother. "Don't forget to check the blue storage bins for the photo albums. Can't wait to see you for dinner tonight." They had no idea what I'd discovered. They had no idea that everything was about to change. The Disney vacation that divided my childhood into before and after deserves its own chapter in this story of family deception. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known as a heartbroken 13-year-old, was that the trip was far more extravagant than they ever let on. And it represented just one instance in a carefully orchestrated pattern of preferential treatment. After discovering the financial records in my parents' attic, I found myself diving deeper into their paper trail. Tucked between tax returns and insurance policies was an envelope labeled Orlando 2007. Inside were receipts, itineraries, and credit card statements that painted a very different picture than the budget-conscious story I'd been told. My parents hadn't just taken Cassidy to Disney World. They'd booked a 10-day luxury vacation package, including 3 days at Disney, followed by a Royal Caribbean cruise to the Bahamas. The total cost was over $12,000 in $2007. This was the same year my father claimed his bonus had been disappointing, and they could only afford to take one child on vacation. More revealing were the credit card statements showing purchases at high-end restaurants, spa treatments for my mother and sister, and several shopping sprees at designer outlets. A receipt for a $450 custom princess makeover for Cassidy was stapled to a handwritten note from my mother. Don't tell Brielle about the cruise or the princess thing, just say you did the regular Disney stuff. They had deliberately planned a lavish vacation and then methodically lied to me about both its nature and the reason I couldn't be included. The betrayal wasn't just about the money, it was about the elaborate deception. When they returned from that trip, I remembered how carefully they monitored what Cassidy could tell me. Remember, just talk about the Disney rides, I overheard my mother whisper to her as they unpacked. Cassidy, to her credit, looked uncomfortable with the deception, but at 16 she wasn't about to challenge our parents or give up the privileges she enjoyed. That vacation marked a turning point in my relationship with my family, though I couldn't articulate it then. Something fundamental had shifted. In the months that followed, I withdrew from family activities, spent more time with friends, and began planning my eventual escape from a household where I clearly held second-tier status. What made the discovery of the vacation documents particularly painful was realizing this wasn't a one-time financial decision, but part of a consistent pattern. The same envelope contained a family budget spreadsheet where my parents had allocated funds for Cassidy activities at nearly 4 times the amount designated for Brielle necessities. My dance lessons had been cut the same year they enrolled Cassidy in an expensive private gymnastics program. After the Disney incident, my parents employed a strategy I now recognize as gaslighting. Whenever I expressed hurt over unequal treatment, they would dismiss my feelings. You're being too sensitive, you're imagining things, or you always make everything about yourself. They reframed their favoritism as a response to our different personalities. Cassidy needed more guidance while I was naturally independent. The summer after the Disney trip, my parents announced another family vacation, this time to visit relatives in Michigan. It wasn't an exciting destination, so I was included. During that trip, I noticed how my parents deferred to Cassidy's preferences on everything from restaurants to activities, while my suggestions were consistently overruled. When I pointed this out during a mini-golf outing that Cassidy had chosen over the Science Museum, I wanted to visit, my father pulled me aside with an unusually stern warning. Stop trying to create problems, Brielle. We do everything equally for both of you girls, and this constant competition you've invented is getting tiresome. I stopped bringing it up after that, but I didn't stop noticing. And I didn't stop keeping score. By the time I reached high school, I had developed a defense mechanism. I stopped asking for things. I became fiercely self-sufficient, taking babysitting jobs to earn money for clothes and school supplies, volunteering to work holiday shifts that paid extra, so I could build my own savings, and applying for every scholarship opportunity available. My parents praised my mature approach to finances while continuing to indulge Cassidy's every whim. My sister wasn't oblivious to the disparity, but she responded with occasional gestures that seemed like guilt offerings, sharing her clothes with me after she'd tired of them, offering to help with my homework, though I maintained better grades, or defending me during family disagreements, while still accepting her preferential treatment. Our relationship was complicated by the dynamics our parents had created, leaving us connected but never truly close. The summer before college brought another revelation about that infamous Disney trip. During a rare moment of sisterly bonding, Cassidy admitted she'd felt uncomfortable about the cruise portion of their vacation. I kept asking why you weren't there, she told me as we sat on her bed sorting through clothes she was packing for college. Mom said you'd chosen to stay home because you didn't like rides and crowds. I knew that wasn't true. You'd been talking about Disney for years. What did Dad say? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the fresh wave of hurt. He said something weird that I didn't understand at the time. He said, Cassidy, sometimes parents have to make investments in the child with the most potential. It bothered me, but I was 16 and getting spoiled on a cruise ship, so I didn't push it. The casual cruelty of my father's statement, delivered while I was at home with a neighbor checking in on me twice daily, crystallized everything I'd felt but couldn't prove. It wasn't about finances or logistics or even parental bandwidth. They had assessed their children and made a cold calculation about which one deserved investment. As I helped my sister pack designer clothes into expensive luggage for her private university experience, I realized I wasn't fighting for equal treatment anymore. I was fighting for my self-worth in a family that had decided long before I could prove myself that I was the lesser investment. The vacation wasn't just a trip they couldn't afford to take me on, it was a manifestation of a family structure where Cassidy occupied the center and I orbited the periphery. And that structure would continue to define our family dynamics until the day I found those financial records and decided enough was enough. What makes betrayal by family so devastating is the slow realization that the people who should love you most have been living a double life, presenting one face to you while showing another to the world, or worse, to other family members. After discovering the financial records and vacation documents, I began to see my parents' double life with painful clarity. The most shocking revelation came when I uncovered a series of holiday cards and letters my parents had sent to extended family members over the years. In our home, holiday traditions were modest: simple gifts, a family dinner, and maybe a trip to see Christmas lights. The narrative my parents presented to relatives, however, painted a picture of family prosperity and perfect equity between their daughters. One Christmas letter from 2010 described both girls are thriving. We've invested in Brielle's academic potential with private tutoring and advanced placement courses, while supporting Cassidy's artistic talents through her dance academy. The truth: Cassidy attended a $15,000 per year dance academy while I was enrolled in regular public school courses with no tutoring. I had begged for help in AP Calculus and been told we couldn't afford it. Another newsletter mentioned, "We're so proud to have set up college funds for both our amazing daughters. Watching them grow into such different but equally valued young women is our greatest joy." This was written the same year my parents told me they had no money saved for my education. As I read through years of these family updates, I felt physically ill. My parents hadn't just prioritized Cassidy. They had constructed an elaborate fiction where they were the perfect, equitable parents who supported both daughters equally. The deception wasn't just for me, it was a performance for our entire extended family. This discovery explained the strange comments I'd occasionally receive from relatives. "Your parents tell us you're doing so well with your piano lessons." I had been given a keyboard and told to teach myself. "We heard about your amazing trip to Boston for that writing workshop I had applied for and won a scholarship that covered the trip." My parents contributed nothing. They had been taking credit for achievements I'd earned entirely on my own. The double life extended beyond finances. I found photo albums carefully curated for family consumption, showing balanced representations of both daughters at family events. Yet in our home, the displayed photos were overwhelmingly of Cassidy, her performances, her graduations, her milestones. My accomplishments rarely made it to the mantelpiece. Even our birthdays revealed the disparity. For my 16th birthday, I received a small family dinner and a used laptop for schoolwork. Cassidy's 16th birthday had included a professionally planned party for 50 guests, a custom dress, and her first car. In the family newsletter, however, both celebrations were described as special milestone events where we spared no expense to make our daughters feel cherished. The discovery that hurt the most was a series of emails between my parents and my maternal grandparents who had passed away 5 years earlier. I had always been close to my grandmother, who seemed to be the only family member who preferred my company to Cassidy's. After she died, my grandfather followed within months, leaving what my parents described as a modest inheritance that was divided responsibly to handle family needs. The emails revealed that my grandparents had specifically designated a portion of their estate, approximately $50,000, for my education. In their will, they had written, "To our granddaughter Brielle, who shares Margaret's love of literature and John's determination, we leave this gift for her educational pursuits." My parents had redirected those funds. The email trail showed my father convincing the estate lawyer that consolidating the inheritance under parental control would be more efficient for tax purposes, assuring them the money would still benefit both girls equally. Bank transfers showed the inheritance being deposited and then gradually moved to Cassidy's college fund and later her wedding and home down payment accounts. They had stolen not just money that was rightfully mine, but my grandparents' last expression of love and belief in me. Money that could have spared me years of student loan debt and financial struggle had instead funded Cassidy's already privileged path. As I pieced together this financial betrayal, I remembered countless moments where my parents had positioned themselves as financially prudent, making difficult but necessary decisions about resource allocation. They had built their parental identity around the narrative of fairness within constraint, a complete fiction designed to mask their blatant favoritism. Their double life affected my relationship with Cassidy, too. I had always harbored a complicated mixture of love and resentment toward my sister. The discovery of these documents shifted my perspective. While she had accepted the advantages offered, she hadn't engineered the systemic inequality. That responsibility lay squarely with my parents. Evidence suggested Cassidy wasn't entirely comfortable with her position. Among the documents were birthday cards she'd sent me over the years, each containing cash, usually $50 or $100, with notes like, "Treat yourself to something nice," or "I know mom and dad are weird about money." Sometimes. What I had interpreted as occasional generosity now looked more like guilt-motivated attempts to balance the scales she knew were tipped. The most recent manifestation of my parents' double life appeared in social media posts about supporting both our girls through life's journey. Photos of rare family gatherings were carefully staged to present an image of familial harmony and parental pride in both daughters. Comments like, "We're equally proud of both our amazing girls," accumulated likes from friends and family who had no idea of the reality behind the smiling photos. Meanwhile, my mother's text messages to me focused on why they couldn't help with my apartment deposit while simultaneously sending my sister links to furniture they offered to buy for her new home. My father called to explain why they couldn't attend my marketing award ceremony due to scheduling conflicts, then posted photos at Cassidy's art gallery opening the same weekend. By maintaining this double life, the false external narrative of perfect equity alongside the reality of systematic favoritism, my parents had added insult to injury. They hadn't just prioritized one child. They had constructed an elaborate facade to hide their choices from others while gaslighting me about the reality I experienced. As I sat surrounded by evidence of their deception, I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront them with what I'd found and demand an explanation, or I could use this knowledge to finally free myself from the yearning for parental approval that had shaped my life. The financial records provided clarity, but they didn't dictate my next steps. The dinner they had invited me to that evening suddenly took on new significance. They had no idea what I now knew. They had no idea everything was about to change. The drive to my parents' house that evening was surreal. The familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood seemed to belong to a different reality, one where I still believed in the comforting lies that had shaped my understanding of family. The manila folder of evidence sat on the passenger seat beside me, its contents threatening to unravel 28 years of carefully maintained family mythology. I had spent the afternoon organizing the documents, chronologically highlighting the most damning examples of financial disparity and outright lies. My hands shook as I arranged the evidence, not from anger alone, but from the terrifying prospect of finally confronting the architects of my insecurity. What would happen when I challenged the narrative they'd spent my entire life constructing? As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Cassidy's car already parked in the spot that had always been reserved for her, the one closest to the front door sheltered by the maple tree. My spot had always been near the street exposed to passing traffic and weather. Even the parking arrangement reflected the family hierarchy. I hadn't planned on my sister being present for this conversation, but perhaps it was fitting. This reckoning concerned all of us. My mother opened the door with her characteristic bright smile, the one that appeared in all our family photographs and holiday cards. "Brielle, you're just in time." Dad opened a special bottle of wine and Cassidy brought dessert from that bakery you like. The casual warmth of her greeting made what I was about to do even harder. Part of me, the part still desperate for parental approval, wanted to tuck the folder under my arm, smile back, and preserve the fragile peace of our family dynamic. The stronger part reminded me that peace built on lies wasn't peace at all. My father emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand. "There's my independent girl. How's the marketing world treating you?" "Independent by design, not by nature," I replied, the words escaping before I could moderate them. His smile faltered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Maybe we should sit down," I suggested, clutching the folder tighter. "I found something interesting while helping you pack today." The living room had been partially dismantled for the move, with spaces on the walls where Cassidy's framed achievements had hung. Even in their absence, the faint rectangles of unfaded paint marked where her accomplishments had been displayed while mine remained in storage boxes. Cassidy entered from the dining room, her expression curious. "Hey sis, what's with the serious face? And what's that folder, evidence?" I said, simply opening it on the coffee table. Evidence of 28 years of lies, favoritism, and financial deception. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, a theatrical gesture that once would have made me back down immediately. My father's face hardened into the stern expression that had intimidated me throughout childhood. Only Cassidy looked genuinely confused, moving closer to see what documents I had spread across the table. "What exactly are you accusing us of?" my father finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts supported by your own records." I pointed to the first document, a statement showing the education account they had established for Cassidy the day she was born. "You told me there wasn't enough money for both of us to attend good colleges." That was a lie. My mother attempted to interrupt, but I continued, pointing to the next document, the detailed expenses from the Disney vacation. "You said you couldn't afford to take both of us." Another lie. One by one, I presented the evidence, the misdirected inheritance, the unequal birthday and Christmas expenditures, the family newsletters with their fictional narrative of equity, and finally my father's credit card statements showing purchases for Cassidy the same months they denied my request for basic school supplies. "You didn't just prefer Cassidy," I concluded, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "You constructed an elaborate fiction to hide your favoritism, while making me believe I was less deserving of your support." My mother was crying now, silent tears tracking through her makeup. My father sat rigidly, his expression unreadable. Cassidy looked stunned, picking up documents and reading them with increasing distress. "Did you know about this?" I asked my sister directly. She shook her head slowly. "Not all of it. I knew I got more. But not that they were lying to you about money. Not that they took Grandma's inheritance meant for you." "Brielle, I swear, this is being blown completely out of proportion," my father interrupted, finding his voice at last. Financial decisions in a family are complex. We did what we thought was best with the resources we had. Best for who I challenged. Every decision favored Cassidy. Every time resources were limited, I was the one who went without. You're stronger than your sister, my mother offered weakly. You've always been more resilient, more independent. I became independent because I had no choice. My carefully maintained composure finally cracked. You forced self-sufficiency on me while actively preventing me from having the same opportunities as Cassidy. Then you praised my maturity as if it were a natural trait rather than a survival strategy. My father stood abruptly. I don't have to justify our parenting decisions to you. We did our best with two very different children. Different doesn't justify unequal, I replied. And these documents show the inequality was systematic and deliberate. Cassidy had gone very quiet, still examining the financial records with a deepening frown. Dad, this shows you took money specifically left for Brielle's education and used it for my wedding. Did you really do that? The question from his favored daughter seemed to hit him differently than my accusations had. He faltered, looking suddenly older. The inheritance was left to the family. We allocated it where it was needed. The will specifically named me, I corrected. Grandma and Grandpa wanted to help me with college. You stole that from me. And from them. The conversation devolved from there. My mother alternated between tearful denials and attempts to minimize the disparity. My father moved from dismissive authority to angry deflection. Only Cassidy seemed genuinely shaken by the evidence, repeatedly asking questions that my parents struggled to answer. The breaking point came when my father finally said what perhaps he had always thought but never verbalized. Investments go where they'll yield the best returns. Cassidy showed exceptional talent from an early age. We had limited resources and had to make choices. The room went silent. Even my mother looked shocked at his blunt admission. I was a child, I said quietly. Not a stock portfolio. My worth shouldn't have been calculated based on your assessment of my potential returns. Before anyone could respond, I stood and gathered the documents back into the folder. I didn't come here for explanations or apologies. I came because I needed you to know that I know. The gaslighting stops today. The lies stop today. Turning to Cassidy, whose face reflected genuine distress, I added, This isn't about you. You didn't create this situation. But you benefited from it, knowingly or not. As I moved toward the door, my mother rushed after me. Brielle, please. We can talk about this. We can make things right. I paused at the threshold. 28 years of systemic favoritism can't be made right in one conversation. I need time. My father hadn't moved from his position in the living room, his pride apparently preventing him from following me. Cassidy stood halfway between us, torn between family loyalties. I'll call you tomorrow, my sister said softly. I nodded and walked out to my car, the weight of 2 decades of inequality somehow lighter now that it was acknowledged. As I drove away, I watched my childhood home recede in the rearview mirror, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. You know, confronting family about long-term betrayal is something many of us struggle with. If you've ever had to stand up to people who should have protected you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. The hardest conversations are often the most necessary ones. Make sure you're subscribed because in the next part, I'll share how my family's response to being exposed completely surprised me in ways both heartbreaking and healing. In the aftermath of confrontation, I expected to feel isolated, cut off from the family that had systematically marginalized me. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the family dynamic would shift, creating new alliances and revealing depths to relationships I had misunderstood for years. The morning after the confrontation, my phone buzzed with a text from Cassidy Coffey. Just us. I need to talk to you. We agreed to meet at a cafe halfway between our apartment's neutral territory for what promised to be a difficult conversation. I arrived first, claiming a quiet corner table and ordering black coffee to steady my nerves. When Cassidy walked in, I was struck by how exhausted she looked, as though she hadn't slept at all. The confident, polished sister, who had always moved through life with ease, suddenly appeared vulnerable and uncertain. I stayed up all night going through old photos and memory boxes, she said, without preamble, sliding into the chair across from me. I was looking for evidence that what you showed us wasn't the whole picture, that there were times when you were the favored one. She wrapped her hands around her mug, looking down. I couldn't find any. Her admission hung between us, heavy with implication. Cassidy had spent her life as the center of our family universe, benefiting from the preferential treatment without questioning its foundation. Now, she was confronting her role in a family dynamic that had damaged her sister. Did you ever suspect, I asked the question that had haunted me for years? Did you know how uneven things were? Cassidy nodded slowly. Parts of it. I knew my dance lessons cost more than anything you did. I knew my car was new and yours wasn't. But Mom and Dad always had explanations that made it seem reasonable. You weren't as interested in expensive activities, you were more practical about material things. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I let myself believe those explanations because they were comfortable. I'm sorry, Brielle. Her apology, the first any family member had offered, caught me off guard. I had prepared for defensiveness, for the same dismissive attitude our parents had perfected. Instead, Cassidy was acknowledging her passive participation in the inequality. What happened after I left last night? I asked. Chaos, she replied with a humorless laugh. Mom cried for hours. Dad locked himself in his office. When he finally came out, they had the biggest fight I've ever seen. Mom kept saying they needed to make things right with you and Dad. She hesitated. Dad, what? I pressed. Dad said you were being dramatic and ungrateful, that everything they'd done was for the good of the family, and that you had turned out fine despite having a chip on your shoulder. She made air quotes around the phrase, her expression reflecting her disagreement. And what do you think? I asked, bracing myself for her answer. Cassidy was silent for a long moment. I think I've been complicit in something awful, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I accepted the benefits without questioning the cost to you. Even when I felt uncomfortable with the differences, I never pushed hard enough for answers. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. I didn't steal that inheritance, Brielle, but I benefited from it. I don't know how to make that right. Her unexpected alliance shifted something fundamental between us. For the first time, we were seeing each other clearly, not through the distorted lens our parents had created. The golden child and the afterthought were just two sisters navigating the damage of parental favoritism from opposite sides of the divide. Over the next 3 hours, we talked more openly than we ever had before. Cassidy revealed her own struggles with our parents' expectations, the crushing pressure to remain the exceptional child who justified their investment. She described panic attacks before performances, knowing our parents had spent money they claimed not to have on costumes and coaching. She admitted to feeling like a showpiece rather than a daughter valued for what she achieved rather than who she was. They didn't do you any favors either, I observed. They just damaged us differently. As our coffee grew cold, another unexpected ally emerged. My phone rang with a call from my mother's sister, Aunt Jenna, who had always been somewhat distant from our immediate family. Cassidy called me this morning, she explained, after I answered. She told me what you found in your parents' records. I need you to know that some of us suspected the disparity but could never confirm it. Your mother would become defensive whenever I questioned why you weren't included in certain opportunities. Aunt Jenna went on to reveal that she had reduced contact with my parents over the years precisely because she was uncomfortable with how they treated me. I should have been more direct in supporting you, she admitted. Instead, I backed away from the entire situation. That was cowardly, and I apologize. By the end of the week, 3 more relatives had reached out: my father's brother, my mother's cousin, and even my elderly great-aunt Meredith, who called to say she had left small savings bonds for both Cassidy and me when we were born, but had only ever received thank you notes about Cassidy's. The family secret wasn't so secret after all, just carefully managed by my parents through strategic information control and social performance. The most surprising ally emerged 10 days after the confrontation. I received an email from my father's longtime assistant Denise, who had worked with him for over 15 years and had been a peripheral presence throughout my childhood. "I hope it's not inappropriate for me to contact you," her message began. "But after what your father said happened at your family dinner, I feel compelled to reach out. For years, I've prepared gifts, made reservations, and arranged experiences for your sister at your father's direction. When I would ask about doing the same for you, he would always say you preferred simpler things or needed less attention. I never felt right about it, but I didn't feel it was my place to question." Denise went on to reveal that she had maintained a separate file of requests my father had denied for me alongside approvals for identical requests from Cassidy. She had documented the pattern out of discomfort with the disparity, though she never confronted my father directly about it. She offered to share the file if it would help me understand the systemic nature of the favoritism. This network of unexpected allies created a safety net I never knew I needed. For years, I had internalized the narrative that I was less deserving, less valuable, less worthy of investment. Now multiple perspectives confirmed what my heart had always known. The problem wasn't me. It was never me. As Cassidy and I rebuilt our relationship on more honest ground and extended family members offered support they had previously withheld, I realized that confronting the truth hadn't isolated me from my family. It had created the possibility of more authentic connections based on reality rather than convenient fictions. My parents remained the holdouts, my mother making tearful overtures without acknowledging the depth of the deception, my father maintaining that his financial decisions had been rational and justified. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring my worth by their assessment. I had evidence, allies, and a growing sense that the truth, however painful, was infinitely preferable to comfortable lies. A month after finding the financial records, I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Opening it with trepidation, I discovered that my maternal grandmother, the one whose inheritance my parents had redirected, had left a separate secret provision in her will that was only to be revealed under specific circumstances. The letter explained that my grandmother had instructed her attorney to monitor my educational and financial situation. If there was ever evidence that her designated funds weren't used for my education as intended, a secondary trust would be activated. She had suspected her daughter and son-in-law might not honor her wishes and had created a backup plan. "Your grandmother was a remarkably astute woman," the elderly lawyer explained when I called the number provided. "She told me, 'I know my daughter, she's always favored Cassidy, and I won't let Margaret do to Brielle what my mother did to me.' Apparently, this pattern of favoritism went back generations in your family." The trust contained $75,000, the original inheritance plus interest accumulated over the years. It had been held in escrow, awaiting either my 30th birthday or evidence of financial malfeasance by my parents, whichever came first. My confrontation and the subsequent family fallout had reached the attorney through my great-aunt Meredith, triggering the release of the funds. Along with the money came a letter from my grandmother written a year before her death. Reading her words was like finding a lifeline thrown across time. "My dearest Brielle, if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Your mother has repeated the mistakes my mother made, choosing one child to elevate at the expense of another. I was the overlooked daughter in my generation, just as you have been in yours. This painful pattern stops with you. The money in this trust is yours without condition or oversight. Use it to build the life you deserve, free from the need to prove your worth to those who should have recognized it from the beginning. Know that I saw your intelligence, your resilience, and your kind heart. I valued these qualities even when others took them for granted. Breaking the cycle of favoritism requires first recognizing it exists. You've done that hard work already. Now comes the harder part, deciding what kind of relationship you want with your family moving forward, if any at all. Whatever you choose, remember this. You were always enough, always worthy, always loved by me without reservation or comparison. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. The letter left me sobbing in my apartment, grieving the grandmother who had seen me clearly and planned so carefully to protect me even after her death. It also presented me with choices I hadn't fully considered. What kind of relationship did I want with my family moving forward? The trust fund provided financial freedom I had never experienced. I could pay off my remaining student loans, create an emergency fund, and even make a down payment on a modest home. The money itself was transformative, but the message behind it, that someone had valued me enough to create this safety net, was even more profound. As I processed this unexpected inheritance, the dynamics with my family continued to evolve. Cassidy and I were rebuilding our relationship on new terms, meeting weekly for coffee or walks where we carefully unpacked our shared history from our different perspectives. She had moved from guilt to genuine self-reflection, examining how being the favored child had shaped her own identity and choices. I always thought Mom and Dad's approval meant I was doing something right, she confessed during one of our walks. Now I realize they approved because of who I was, not what I did. The flip side was how they treated you, disapproving not because of what you did, but because of who you were in their narrative. She paused, kicking at a stone on the path. It's messed up, Brielle. And I'm still trying to figure out who I am outside of being their golden child. Extended family members continue to reach out, many expressing regret for not intervening sooner. Family gatherings, once dominated by my parents' carefully constructed narrative, were being reorganized without them at the center. My Aunt Jenna hosted a cousin's weekend where for the first time I heard stories about my mother's childhood that echoed my own experiences. Her sister had received similar preferential treatment from their mother. The painful truth, my aunt explained, is that your mother is repeating a pattern she swore she'd never continue. Your grandmother favored your mother the way your mother favored Cassidy. These cycles run deep in families unless someone consciously breaks them. My parents' responses remain divided. My mother made increasingly desperate attempts at reconciliation, sending gifts I returned unopened and leaving voicemails that alternated between tearful apologies and defensive justifications. She couldn't seem to understand that what I wanted wasn't compensation but accountability, a genuine acknowledgement of the systematic favoritism and its impact on my life. My father maintained his position that their financial decisions had been rational and justified. Every family has limited resources, he insisted in his single attempt at communication, a formal email sent 3 weeks after the confrontation. We allocated ours based on the most logical return on investment. That's not favoritism. It's responsible parenting. His cold transactional framing only confirmed what I now understood. In his eyes, I had always been the lesser investment, the child whose potential didn't warrant equal support. The clarity was painful but liberating. I no longer needed to earn the approval of someone who had decided my worth before I had the chance to demonstrate it. The most unexpected development came through Denise, my father's assistant. After sharing her file documenting the pattern of differential treatment, she revealed something else. My father had created educational trusts for both his grandchildren, Cassidy's two young children. The trusts were dramatically unequal, with his grandson receiving twice the funding of his granddaughter. He's replicating the same pattern with the next generation, Denise explained. I thought you should know, since Cassidy might not be aware of the disparity. This information presented a moral dilemma. Did I have a responsibility to alert my sister that her children were being subjected to the same pattern of favoritism? After careful consideration, I decided transparency was the only ethical choice. I shared what I had learned with Cassidy over dinner at her home. Her reaction surprised me. Without hesitation, she called her financial advisor from the dinner table, instructing him to decline any further contributions to her children's accounts from their grandfather and to equalize the existing funds between them immediately. The cycle stops with us, she said firmly after hanging up. My children will never wonder if we value them differently based on their gender or their talents or anything else. In that moment, I realized that while my grandmother's financial inheritance was significant, the more valuable inheritance was the truth itself. By uncovering and confronting the pattern of favoritism, I had created the possibility for genuine change, not just for myself, but potentially for generations to come. The money would change my financial situation, but the truth was changing my family's future. That was the real inheritance, and its value was immeasurable. 1 year after finding those financial records in my parents' attic, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, a modest but charming 2-bedroom house purchased with the combination of my grandmother's trust fund and my own savings. The morning light filtered through windows I had installed myself, part of the renovation skills I developed out of necessity and now continued from choice. On the refrigerator hung an invitation to Cassidy's daughter's birthday party addressed to Aunt Brielle, the favorite aunt. The journey from confrontation to this moment of relative peace had been neither straight nor easy. The family landscape had been permanently altered, relationships reconfigured into new patterns that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. My mother had finally accepted that reconciliation required more than tearful apologies and attempted gifts. After 6 months of my returning her calls with brief factual responses and maintaining firm boundaries, she had agreed to meet with a family therapist. Our sessions were challenging. Her instinct to minimize, justify, or redirect remained strong, but small moments of genuine accountability had begun to emerge. I favored Cassidy because she was easier to understand, she admitted during our 3rd session. She was like me, interested in the same things, expressive in ways I recognized. You were a mystery, more like my sister than me. I took the easy path of connecting with the child who reflected myself instead of doing the harder work of understanding a daughter who was different. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the systematic favoritism, but it was a start. My father remained largely unreachable. He attended 2 therapy sessions before declaring the process a waste of time and withdrawing from any attempt at reconciliation. His assistant Denise reported that he rarely mentioned me anymore, and when he did, it was with a dismissive tone that suggested he considered my estrangement a confirmation of his initial assessment that I had always been the difficult, less valuable child. His rejection still stung, but not with the devastating force it once would have carried. I no longer measured my worth by his approval or understood his coldness as evidence of my inadequacy. Instead, I recognized it as his limitation, the inability to see beyond his narrow definition of value or to acknowledge the harm his choices had caused. Cassidy and I had developed a relationship that would have been unimaginable in our childhood. One based on honest communication and mutual support rather than competition for parental attention. She had become one of my strongest advocates, consistently correcting the narrative when relatives minimized the favoritism or suggested I was overreacting. You have no idea what it was like for her, she told our Aunt Carol at a family gathering when the older woman suggested I should just get over it. I watched it happen for years and said nothing. I'm not going to be silent anymore when people dismiss what she experienced. My sister's children, 5-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Jacob, had become important presences in my life. I made a point of spending equal time with both, celebrating their different interests and personalities without comparison. When Jacob showed artistic talent like his mother, I praised his creativity. When Emma revealed an aptitude for sports and mathematics areas neither Cassidy nor I had excelled in, I cheered just as loudly for her achievements. "You're really good with them," Cassidy observed after I taught Emma how to calculate batting averages, an afternoon activity that left the kitchen table covered in penciled numbers and baseball cards. "You're careful about treating them the same way without making them feel like the same person." "I'm giving them what we didn't have," I replied simply. The legacy of my childhood wasn't all negative. It had made me acutely sensitive to the subtle ways adults signal value and worth to children. That awareness had become a gift I could offer to the next generation. The financial freedom provided by my grandmother's inheritance allowed me not just material stability but the opportunity to reconsider my career path. After years in a marketing position I had chosen primarily for its security and salary, I took the risk of accepting a lower-paying but more fulfilling role with a nonprofit supporting first-generation college students. The work resonated with my own experience of navigating higher education without family guidance or support. My colleagues, many of whom had similar backgrounds, became a chosen family of sorts. People who understood achievement in the context of adversity without requiring the explanation my biological family often needed. Not all relationships could be salvaged. Several relatives who had witnessed the favoritism but remained silent for decades proved unwilling to acknowledge their complicity, preferring to frame the situation as a misunderstanding or suggest I was being unnecessarily dramatic. I made the difficult decision to distance myself from these relationships, recognizing that continued contact would require me to minimize my experience to make others comfortable, a pattern I was determined to break. The most unexpected relationship to evolve was with my grandmother despite her physical absence. Through her letter and the trust she had established, I developed a sense of connection with her that transcended death. I found myself having imaginary conversations with her while gardening or cooking activities she had loved, according to family stories. Her recognition of my worth, established in concrete practical terms through her financial planning, had created a foundation for me to recognize it in myself. On the anniversary of finding those financial records, I invited the people who had become my chosen family to my new home for dinner. Cassidy and her children, Aunt Jenna. A few cousins who had demonstrated genuine support and close friends, who had stood by me through the upheaval of the past year. My mother was included with clear boundaries. My father was not. As we gathered around the table, I had refinished myself sharing dishes prepared from recipes both old and new. I looked at the faces of people who saw me clearly and valued me as I was. The family I had been born into had been irreparably altered by truth, but the family we were creating now was stronger for its foundation in reality rather than comfortable fictions. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass as conversation momentarily paused. "To inherited wisdom and chosen family, to breaking cycles and building better ones, and to the truth. Painful as it sometimes is, it's the only solid ground we have to build on." As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged around my table, I felt the weight of those financial records, the tangible evidence of years of inequality and deception, finally begin to lift. They had revealed a painful truth, but in doing so had set me free to build a life based not on the approval I had never fully earned, but on the worth I had always possessed. The family we're born into shapes us, but the family we choose defines us. In choosing truth over comfortable lies, I had finally found my way home. I hope my story resonates with some of you who've experienced similar family dynamics. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? or found yourself having to establish boundaries with people who should have protected you? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. If this journey of confronting family karma and finding justice spoke to you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more real-life stories and share with someone who might need to hear they're not crazy for questioning family patterns. Thank you for being here with me through this healing process. Sometimes the family we find in unexpected places becomes the strongest support we have. Until next time.